This is Ed in San Diego, California, and you are on Global TV Talk Show. And welcome, everybody. So this is a London conference, if you will. I really would have loved to have been there in person to meet everybody again, and someday we're going to do that. Our GEO series, GEO, capital letters, is being launched today in London, and tomorrow we're doing France. And then the next day we're doing a meeting in Helsinki, and then the next day in Hamburg, and then the next day we're doing two in Italy. One show will focus on Milano, and Dave Levine is responsible for helping me organize that. And Sinatra, you remember that name. So this is no
Laura
relation,
Sinatra.
I guess,
No
but
relation.
Laura Sinatra is going to be a speaker. Brigitte, do you know Laura Sinatra?
Yes, I do. Yes, so you have something really good and waiting for you.
Yes, indeed. And then, so that will be at 3 o'clock in Milan, and at 4 o'clock in Rome, I have a special guest, Damien O'Farrell, who anybody in the relocation business knows who he is. He's an expert on Italy as a destination, and we're going to be talking about a real special aspect of that, about taking care of I wouldn't call them crazy rich Asians like the movie, but they're very wealthy people who live in Asia who are investing in Italy right now. And he's helping a lot of them. And he's going to be talking about that. So that's, well, it's going to be a really interesting week, that's for sure. So everybody, James Moss is here. He's from Britain, and he's hosted my conference, live conference in London a couple of times, and one of them fabulously at the HAC. James, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here and great to be in the mix.
Why don't you explain what HAC means briefly?
Oh, HAC. Right, the HAC stands for the Honourable Artillery Company, and it is a reserve regiment in the British Army, and it is also the oldest regiment in the British Army. It's not the most senior regiment, that belongs to the Coldstream Guards, so if anyone's into this, you'll be following it now. But it is actually the oldest regiment. And they provide the personal bodyguard to the Lord Mayor. There you go, Ed.
Yes, that's it. And thank you. So we did a meeting there, and thank you for hosting us there. Okay, meet Andy Alleman. Andrew Alleman is in near Cambridge, right?
Yeah, not too far from Cambridge.
Right. Okay. So do you ride your bike around that campus?
No. Well, I ride it around the village where I live. Yes. So for anyone who doesn't know, I ride a penny farthing bicycle, and I tend to do a lot of riding around Buckingham Palace, etc., and around London, dressed as a Victorian most of the time, but sometimes as a guard, sometimes. So yeah, always doing something on my bike.
That's very interesting. Brigitte, please introduce yourself formally. What you're involved in employee assistance plans for what organization currently?
So hi, I'm Birgit Lundgren, and I'm the clinical director for the mental health side at an organization that is called Health Hero. And Health Hero is trying to make a one-stop access to GP practices and to speech therapy, out of hours care, but I'm sitting on the mental health, that is the old part of the employee assistance program. So trying to monitor what's happening in the employee market at the moment, and it's definitely changing it. But we'll come into that later. So yeah, I'm based just outside London, and as you can hear, I'm not from around, I'm Danish, and I actually did start my career as a psychologist in the Danish army.
No, it's very interesting. Wow. Well, I've been in Denmark, in Copenhagen. In fact, we
Okay.
have relatives through Joanne. Her family's Danish, and we've visited the relatives a few times. And of course, walked through Tivoli Gardens, but we also just had a lot of Danish pastry too. So you're here at the courtesy of my good friend Dave Levine. Dave?
Hi, yeah. Like Birgit, I'm a clinician, but unlike Birgit, she followed a clinical path in her career, and I followed more of on the customer side of the business. I'm the founder and principal of Global Care Experts, which provides crisis response and EAP services for employers outside the U.S., typically U.S.-based multinationals, but the services we provide are outside the U.S. I'm based here in Minnesota, and we can talk more about how I think Birgit's path and Health Hero sort of typify what's been going on in the field for the past 5 years.
Great, thank you. Michael Piker, thank you for being on Global TV Talk Show. I think this is your 4th or 5th program. I really appreciate you doing this. Michael is an executive with Flutter, a very large company based in the UK. And Michael is from New York area, but he's in London and happy, right?
Very happy, yep. Yeah, we sadly had Her Majesty pass away a couple of weeks ago. I was one of the lot that stood in that line for 13 hours, which was an honor to see Westminster Hall at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was quite a sight to see. So it's lovely to live in this beautiful country.
Yeah, I watched a lot of that, not all of it, but I watched a lot of it. And I thought the speech by the king, the first speech, terrific. And James and I discussed that. James, we always knew that Charles was very well educated and very much into the whole monarchy, but he always took an aggressive, from my view, always took an aggressive view to tell rich businessmen about environmental concerns, even 25 years ago.
Yeah, it's a really great point, and it's very timely because Charles is a great environmentalist, and he's been bashing the environmentalist drum long before any of us were really up to speed with it. I mean, he was really ahead of his time. But there's a COP conference coming up in Sharm el-Sheikh, I think, fairly shortly. Environmental conference. And Charles was supposed to go over as the opening keynote speaker, but has withdrawn following a meeting with the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who advised him that maybe, given his new role, it would not be appropriate. So what's interesting here is that Charles is having to step back a bit from his great passions, of which the environment is one, and he's prepared for it. He was interviewed on the BBC a while ago before he became king, and they said, "Oh, when you king, are you going to be as outspoken as you are now?" And he looked with a slight sort of slant in his eye. He said, "My God, no! You don't think I'm stupid, are you?" Do you? Anyway, so yeah, so it's a really good point, and Charles. Environment, architecture is another one of his great passions, which he's always been quite outspoken about. And yeah, he's having to step back. I think he's going to be a great king, by the way. I think Charles III is good news. He's really ready for the job. He's had a lot of time to prepare for it. And I think it's going to be a very safe, solid pair of hands.
Looks like he'll be a great role model for William.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's it's going to be fairly transitional. I mean, he's 72 years old. So, I mean, I don't know how long any of us are going to live. But it's, you would think that William's probably going to be in for quite a long reign. So yeah, sorry, that was phone's good. But yeah, okay. I think it's all good news.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I want to introduce a good friend, Yvonne Quire, who's in Washington, D.C. And she's the author of a wonderful book that's right on, spot on, as you guys would say, about focusing on the issues connected with dual career marriages in industry. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, Ed, for having me. I'm glad you said I'm in Washington, D.C. I was wondering whether I should spill the beans to say I'm not in England and I'm not British.
Yes, okay. Why don't you tell the audience now who you are and what your day job is?
Well, I wouldn't say I work by day and I write by night. That would be too grand. I'm from Singapore, and I have lived all over the world, 5 countries, 3 continents. I am a sociologist initially, but now I have moved much more into leadership, learning, career development. My initial experience is in global mobility, so I still look after globally mobile populations. In my day job, I suppose, I would say, I do work for the World Bank Family Network, and we support all our families in the 140 countries that we have offices.
Okay, so you're the author of this book called Whose Career Is It, Yours, Mine, or Ours? And that is just a terrific thing. Now, I came to you at the kind introduction of Andy Elliman, and I thank you, Andy. So, Andy, do you use her book as part of your customer service when you're dealing with mobility clients?
Well, actually, we're in talks at the moment, because I think the book is so spot on to what corporates need. They need to understand what's actually happening with the spouses, and how does that actually affect the whole assignment and everything. And Yvonne's book is really spot on when it comes to explaining the things that we're going through, the everyday things that happen. And there's examples in the book as well that give you really good ideas of what you should expect within that scenario. For us as a company, obviously, we're in 97 countries ourselves, and we're helping companies to relocate all the time. So, it's important for us to be putting the right message out. And we're actually in talks with Yvonne at the moment to take on some of these books to give out to our clients, because I think it's a much better giveaway than most of the things you could give away. Give away knowledge. That's probably the best thing you can give away in global mobility.
And caring. So, Yvonne, when you were writing that book, you drew on your own files and your own experiences, and your personal experience, as well as the people in the bank, the families in the bank. These are high-powered people, and so there must have been tugs of war going on that you were involved with, at least on the periphery, and that caused you to get into the more technical aspects of relationships and mental stability, because it impacts the work.
Yes, it does. And now particularly with women, we're finding in this context of attraction and retention, a lot of people want to know, can my partner continue their career? And so there's a lot of angst about it. And for those who relocate because it was a good idea for one, without thinking it through, when they actually arrive and have had time to settle down, then it suddenly hits them with the, oh gosh, what have I done now? So this is becoming more and more of an issue, not less and less. And of course, as we all know, there are more and more barriers as people move in terms of immigration. So, what is that balance and how do you feel? Because some of the effects are not felt immediately, but they can come back. Now I'm looking more and more since the publication of the book into inequity between the partners. And I don't mean about money. I'm talking about inequity of opportunity. So it's always your career, you're forging ahead, then what about me? So initially, people are, because you're in a partnership and we hope bonded together by love, it seems all right. But then 10 years later, it's like, wait a minute, how come it's always you? So when now I'm beginning to see that the issue also goes back to childcare. Whose child is it? Yours, mine, or ours? Because when it comes to career, we're seeing a lot of women are doing 2/3 of the household responsibility. And so with the post-COVID world, the return to hybrid work, the boundaries of work and home are now fudged, and women are landed still with the bulk. Now, what is so fascinating is that McKinsey have done a study, and they have found that the most equitable integrated relationships are with same gender couples, because I guess they're not tethered to gender roles. As one of them said in the survey, I don't have to be the useless husband in this. So, that communication and how you present to the world, what do you say, actually, I think has built a lot of communication skills. And they're not tethered to that role, which goes back, which I think is very fascinating.
I want to bring in Dr. Simon T. Bailey, who's the former leader of Disney Institute. And so many people have told me they loved the interview that you and I did, and have purchased your book. Hopefully you're seeing some results from that personally. So Simon, I held you back here because I wanted you to get perspective on who all these great people are, because that'll give you more leverage now. Simon?
Well, first of all, hello to everyone. It's so good to be with you. And what I so love about what Yvonne just shared, there's a conversation that's happening in many households, and that is the conversation of who's going to take the lead career. And what we are discovering is that women are taking the lead career, and many husbands are staying home. What that means for organizations and businesses is, how do you help women be activated and advanced in the organization? Because all of the research says that 62% of automobile purchases made by women, 85% of consumer spending controlled by women, 92% of vacation plans decided by women. So organizations that are really going to thrive in the next decade must think about, how do they set the organization up to ensure that women thrive and flourish, and men also grow as a result.
Can I chime in? You can see I'm an
of course.
Feminist here, so this is it's got me going. But anyway, to go back with the women in the organization, a lot of men. There was another very interesting research piece that's saying that the younger men are trying to be bread sharers, so they want to actually accommodate their partners' careers. But sometimes the organizations don't help, particularly the management consultants, where it is a very breadwinner lifestyle. But men are, generally speaking, held back by this gender role. And so they want to break out, but there is this gray area where they're really not sure, like, how do we share it? And I think that's where I write about the most basic, just talk about it with each other and figure it out together. And what may work for couple A may not work for couple B, so that's where it's very interesting. So it's hard for women. I still think it's a man's world. There are lots of things that men can say in a company, in a context, that women cannot say. And because if they say it, they will be like, oh, she's so pushy, she's too ambitious, she's aggressive. And when the man says that, it's, oh, he's assertive, he knows what he wants. So, it can be the same words, but I think we are more, even in our own unconscious, much more genderized than we think.
Let me bring in the mental health aspects. Dave and Brigitte, Could you address this?
What I would say, some of the things that I'm trying to be writing about and talking about when we talk about equality, then it's also about, you are a new dad and you come back to work and the organization are actually expecting you to work as long hours as you did a week ago before you had this child. So we are starting very, very early on in not recognizing that we as an organization are in competition with the attention of our employees. So if we don't make it easier for the men to be men in the organization as well, we definitely are not helping with the equality in the organization. I'm seeing men calling the counseling line where, unfortunately, the wife have had a miscarriage. They're coming back to work and everyone are expecting them to do exactly what they did yesterday, because it was just in the organization's way of thinking about it. There wasn't a child, but there's a grieving man and there's a grieving woman, but we are not making room for it in the organization. So we also need to look at the culture within the organization. We talk so much about well-being, but what is the culture in the organization? Everyone
That's
can buy an
cruelty.
EAP.
If I can jump in here, that just sounds so cruel, and that these people are going to remember that forever.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah, these people are going to remember that. It's almost like an insult and an attack. Dr. Simon Bailey, and that guy, I assume it's a guy, he ought to get your book.
Yes, I think right now, to build on what she just said, organizations have to think about empathetic leadership. Empathetic leadership is, number one, how do we honor human beings where they are? Number two, how do we create a culture where people are celebrated, not just tolerated? Number three, how do we ensure that every leader understands that we treat people as human beings, not just human doings?
Exactly.
Dave?
It's complex times. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we had these struggles and relationship issues and complexities about emerging, the Me Too movement and emerging power of women and more sensitivity around that. And the political divisiveness had started, the conflicts between whether you really should bring your whole self to work or not, or compartmentalize, if that's healthier. And now we've got excessive political divisiveness, sometimes in the same families. The adjustments that the pandemic has created, remote workers and shared childcare and mental health issues on the rise, oftentimes reflected in relationships in couples. And it's you add to that a war and the passing of a monarchy in Great Britain. There's a lot going on for people to absorb, and as Birgit said, show up at work as if everything's fine, and perform like they did yesterday. It's I think employers are becoming more aware. If the pandemic had a silver lining, there's an increased awareness, appreciation for mental health issues, and many are putting their money where that recognition is and investing in culture and communications and flex time and counseling services for people to help them with these adjustments that before they were taken for granted, that just show up and perform as they did yesterday.
Michael Piker, I'd like you to address this. I know you're a champion of DE&I and everything connected with all that, but in your long experience, you see ROI on that, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, building on some of the themes before, for example, I did an expat, I think last Friday, on DE&I meets global mobility. My personal case with my husband and I living in 9 countries, being very hard to bring along your husband and to get gainful employment. But building on the earlier theme around obviously mental well-being, the inextricable link now is financial well-being. So we have 30,000 people around the world in my company. So in my two hats, I've got COLA inflation and a lot of, frankly, economic constraints that my staff are facing all over the world, exacerbated also by, of course, mental well-being. So the two are coming together, and the intersection about how to advance people in this very, very difficult plight at the moment is our biggest, frankly, threat we're facing as a company. I'm sure many in the call are probably facing the same conundrum that we're
Keeping
facing.
people is the threat, is that right?
It's not just keeping, but keeping themselves whole and there. You've heard about the partial checkout, which, the TikToks have been going like mad, 6 million views in the last 3 weeks. So, checking out at 5 and not showing up. And we're definitely seeing that.
Yeah. And so
I think, if I
yes,
may
please
say,
go
I
ahead.
think people are just exhausted. That's why they're checking out. They have no more mental energy because of this whole level of uncertainty. I don't know, to build on Michael, I don't know how my pension is going to go. I don't know whether I'm going to earn enough, because the pension pot is tanking, thanks to, unless the Bank of England steps in. I mean, that's pretty scary. Maybe there will be a war. I think people are facing a lot of mental stress. And so it's sort of natural they check out and maybe, vegetate and watch TikTok endlessly, because in one way, you can just watch it without responding, if you know what I mean. It keeps away the wolf from the door, as it were, about my pension, how much will, can I feed my kids, or whatever the question would be. I think for most professionals, there's two things: pension and mortgage. I mean, I think the feeding the kids is probably okay. I could be wrong, but.
Yeah, and I can see it when I look at the data, but we are collecting about the ones who are seeking support from us. It is the demand at work that are the main issue people are calling in. And when we talk about that, we're having difficulty to attract workers. So the pressure on the ones who actually are turning up for work, and that might be the one who works in a call center in the financial institutes, or it might be the nurses and the doctors we are hearing about. So in some way the demand are so high, but at the same time the anxiety on the mental health side, and they don't dare to go out and risking their the work they have now by joining another company they don't know if they're here tomorrow. So they're really feeling trapped, and it must be an awful place to be, that you go to work and you're spending all the energy, you're trying to deliver the service, and at the same time you are fearful of your mortgage, and you're fearful of your pension, and the child and the childcare. And here in UK the childcare is so expensive, so that in itself is another add-on. You need to look for the university of your young people, the parents who are calling in, and they're all starting university at the moment, and so worried about they can't support the young people going to the university, and the allowance they get for being at the university can actually not cover the bills this year.
So before we proceed, I want everybody to exchange in the chat. You see that thing down the bottom, chat. Introduce yourself, your website, your email, because that's the ROI of this conference, is the the networking and the resources that we have right here on this program. Andy Elliman, are you seeing feedback from your client base, your corporate clients across Europe, asking for any information or guidance to resources in this regard, that we're talking about human care?
Yeah, I mean, completely. I mean, it's highlighted. One thing I would like to say, like, I think the whole aspect of where the pressures are come from, and the stress levels and the anxieties, I think that's always been there in our, we've always done that. I think what's contributed to that over the years is social media, the fact that now we want it literally within seconds. You see something, you realize that, oh, that's what I need. And I think with the global mobility side, something you were saying, Yvonne and Simon, when it comes down to, the spousal side of it, and they follow on, and it's led more by the man maybe in the role. It depends geographically as well. I think there's a big element there where if you're sending people to certain countries don't allow the spouse to have any sort of right in certain areas. So we have to look at it from a real global side of things as well, because we're looking at the moment of maybe what we know here and in our countries, but when you're moving people globally, there's so many different things that you can and can't do that are taken out of your hand, and the pressure must be on those people and also on the companies that are moving them there. You can't just send certain people to these areas because they would fit in, but the country wouldn't allow them to fit in. So and it makes it very difficult for people, and the pressure's added to that, from what you were saying, Birgit, of the anxiety. There's so many things that are involved with going on an assignment that for a company, in your mind as a company, you want them to get there, do the job that you're asking them to do. You don't want all the things around that to affect it, but they do. And companies are coming to us now actually trying to understand, okay, we've got the perfect candidate here to send, but maybe that's not the person to send because we have the one that's not as perfect, that fits the criteria to go into that location, who can deal with those stresses and things. I think with the pandemic, it's all come to the top. Everyone sat at home and thought, what do I really need in life? And that's where the real, and we've all done it, all of us in this room right now. I guarantee all of us in this pandemic sat down and thought, what am I doing? I did it. I started working even longer hours because I was working from home. So, I would switch my computer on at 7 in the morning and you're still sitting there at 7 at night. That's not good, but you do it because you're conscious that, okay, I want them to see that I'm really working at what I'm doing and making a difference. And I think the pressures come from everything building up to this point. So the answer to your question is yes, companies are looking different. Every conference I go to at the moment, there's a big focus on what are you doing to look after your assignees, but also, what impact is that having on their home life? How is that working for them?
Yeah.
Does from that side?
Can I
Yes.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
I move quite a lot of people around. We do it sort of remotely and so on. But what we've noticed is, of course, the shift to hybrid working, which sort of changes the dynamic a bit. And I think your point about working and spouses traveling to different cultures in different countries and the way they respond works both ways, actually. From a strict society to a more liberal society. For people going in both directions. One of the things we've been focusing on has been very much on the support, the post-move support. And there's some very good apps and some very good new sort of social communication channels opening up now. And one of the things we're looking at doing is not only engaging in those channels, but also having sort of monthly or quarterly meetings, gatherings, they're not really meetings at all, of people who from different organizations, different backgrounds, but they all have one thing in common. They're all experiencing this dramatic change, be it individually and with their spouses and so on. And we're trying to put a lot of thought into that whole sort of community support, because if the old-fashioned word was trading spouse, which I think was just the most awful language, but anyway, but if you take that, most relocations that fail are not successful, it's because of the partner who's neglected or not looked after or whatever. That could be socially, it could be work, it could be in all sorts of situations. So I think there's a lot of change going on at the moment. And I think there are a lot of challenges for organizations on how they sort of keep up with all of that. So I just want to tip those thoughts in there.
Thank you very much for that. That's spot on. So Dave Levine, so everybody, Dave Levine is a leading sponsor of this program, as is Andy Elliman, and also PZI, who will be on the next edition when they come back in. So I want to say thank you to you people for being so open here. Andy Elliman, you have teams, you have people in Ukraine, Moldova area. Would you like to address briefly what's going on there? By, you know, are people being relocated out, in, around Eastern Europe? Andy, are you there?
Yep, I'm back now. It cut out for a minute.
Okay, so I wanted to I wanted to bring you in this discussion to talk about your team in Eastern Europe, particularly Moldova and Ukraine. Are things going on okay there, or are things halted?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I know our Ukrainian guy was on your show a little while ago. We're still operating where we can. It's obviously difficult. You do what you can over there, but we are operating as much as we can with the resources that we have. So for anyone that knows, we have a large relocation and move-in site in Ukraine. When people started to leave Ukraine, our clients getting their people out, obviously they were leaving their furniture behind, etc. So we started putting their furniture in underground storage areas for them, just to protect what we can, and doing what we can to assist them in that side. It's more what's happening outside, if I'm honest. So outside Ukraine into the rest of Europe, accommodation to find for international assignments is becoming impossible in some countries. If you look at Amsterdam at the moment, you got no chance of getting any apartment or anything out there. I mean, it's just so many people have moved into these areas, and it's all a knock-on effect from what we're seeing from the war. So yeah, it's how you can help and what you can do to assist those sides. But we're seeing a lot of people coming out of Russia as well. So you know, it's a huge amount of people that are leaving these countries and moving into the other countries that are impacting all the other countries as well. So yeah, we're seeing a lot from that side. For the Ukrainian side, you know, we get daily updates from our guys, you know, who are still work. I take my hat off to them because they still work every single day, like where they can and what they can do. They give us reports of what's happening. It's just sad. It's just sad. Something we didn't expect to see in our lifetime, but it shows how much it's impacting the rest of the world, not just Europe, the rest of the world. And what we need to start thinking about is, like, you know, how do we assist? You talked about the mental side of this as well, of how it's affected people. Now imagine a family that's now just had to leave their home country, whether that be Ukraine, whether it be Russia or any other country, where they've had to flee that country or get out of that country and now set up in a new country with a different language. I can't imagine what they're going through. It's incredible.
Thank you, Andy. I want to address the coming crisis of winter and tight fuel allocations, and whether it will be, it'll be expensive. So a lot of companies, I think a lot of companies are going to be in the middle of this, because I'm here in Southern California, so I'm sort of talking like intellectually here rather than experientially. Dave Levine, Bridget, Michael Piker, Yvonne, these are all human issues. Dr. Bailey, if you could jump in here too, talk about how are you going to be, everybody, how are you going to be proactively taking care of people who you manage or lead, coach? knowing that there's going to be a big crisis starting in about 90 days or less in Europe? Dr. Bailey?
One of the things I'm encouraging leaders to do, number one, is connect. Ask people, how are you doing? It's just that simple question to know that someone is concerned about me. Number two, leaders doubling down on what can I do to best serve you? That simple question of allowing people to know that you care. And I think the third thing, creating this culture of ongoing communication where it's not just about the work, but it's about how do we be a holistic, human-centered organization where every human being matters, and they know it by the actions and the behaviors they receive and see on a daily basis.
Yvonne?
I think when there's a high level of uncertainty, I think one thing we can do, apart from what Simon said on the organizational side, but on the individual side, I think is to help people do what I call dial down on their uncertainty, because the world we live in is very uncertain. So what can I do to return some certainty into my life so that my brain is actually functioning as opposed to be in high gear all the time? So what are the points of certainty that I can regulate? And I think if you go back to what Simon said, if I know I can count on my leader, so if I know that I can phone and I will be heard by my leader, even in the midst of uncertainty, those are what I call pockets of certainty. So I think it's building those, whether it is whether it's resilience within, or whether it is connections within the community. I think it goes a lot to regulation of your emotion, to go back to Simon, if I know where I can go and get help. So it's like, okay, if my heating cuts out and I'm freezing, who can I go to my neighbor? Can I call my leader and say, I don't know what he can do, but all I'm saying is those, what I call pockets of certainty, because everything else is moving at that time, I think. And the brain doesn't like it. So we have to try to make the atmosphere in which we function more brain friendly.
Yeah, thank you. Michael Piker, could you comment on this? Are you thinking of, if not already doing it, some plans, emergency plans, or communications with employees?
Yeah, yeah. So me and my FTSE 20 peers are doing lots of things in the UK because the Chancellor just unveiled a very wonky budget, as you heard, in the UK, which has pummeled the sterling, as you know. So a lot of companies, including ours, are providing vouchers for Christmas and energy spike. So we're doing £400 vouchers for our 10,000 staff across the UK and Irish retail estate. Financial well-being, coupled with mental well-being, we use Nudge. We also use Tesco, for example, is using their sites to actually feed those that are very facing a huge inflation spike. We're doing something of similar ilk. So I guess what I'm trying to say, energy inflation meets depressive sterling in the UK has exacerbated this problem exponentially. And I think every company in the UK is doing something about it right now.
James Moss, on your new app, Absolute Relo, are you putting in, well, what do you think of this discussion? And can you apply a question or a service thing on your app pretty quick to address this issue for people thinking about that problem?
Yeah, I mean, more along the lines of tips of where to go to support. I mean, our Relo advisors, who are like, think of them as a sort of concierge person, a PA to the individual who's moving, okay? And the whole concept of that is that it's the needs of the individual that matter rather than the needs of the organization that wants to put upon the individual what the organization thinks they need. And that means that the Relo advisors can zero in on the specific needs of individuals. So let's say, for example, they're very concerned about energy costs. Okay, and they're looking for they're therefore looking for a home, apartment, whatever it's going to be, where there's going to have very high levels of sustainability, and small energy bills or smaller energy bills, or situations which you don't really find very often these days, but where the rent includes a number of other things, other utilities, which used to be able to find that. So yeah, there are various ways you can do it. We can't sort of reach out and give vouchers and that sort of thing. But what we can do is we can help people sort of talk through it and navigate it for their own specific needs and purposes. So yeah, that much we certainly can do. Also, the other thing about being remote, it's very sustainable in any event. So it's low carbon footprint stuff and so on. But in times of almost crisis, it is very much down to the personal needs of the individual. And also we can relay that to the parent companies as well. And that often is very helpful for them to build up their response to the individual and support them.
Remember now, the world is going to see this program. So with that in mind, I want to say that we have about 6 minutes remaining. We can go longer, but I think our audience is going to leave. Dave Levine, would you like to address what we've been addressing here? And perhaps you and Bridget can talk about, in summary fashion, the mental health tips.
Yeah, let me add a few points. Really admirable what Michael has shared about what Flutter is doing in response to the financial burdens and pressures that everybody's feeling. Really impressive. But this is not, you just can't throw 400 pounds at an organization, per person at an organization, and expect they'll stick around. I know in Flutter's case, that is on top of lots of efforts to make Flutter an organization of choice. And culture, I think, is at its essence. I'm a social worker, and I've spent a lot of my career advocating, if not directly counseling, advocating for counseling services and trying to reestablish control over what seems to be out of control. And lots of pressures are leading us to feel out of control. So I'm encouraging leaders to have that sense of positivity. I liked what Dr. Bailey had offered. Agree that leaders are the key, and if they can bring with them, acknowledge the communications, as Dr. Bailey emphasized, is critical. But if they can bring with those communications an acknowledgement for the pressures and a sense of positivism that there's a way out, think that this isn't your baseline, and bring that sense of community and shared responsibility for the pressures everyone is facing is important. Lou Gerstner at IBM, a former IBM CEO, said 20 years ago that emphasized the importance of culture in organizations. And I think that's proved to be visionary. We heard the cliche culture eats strategy for lunch. I don't know who said that, but it's the importance of culture. And we've talked about the culture of communications, the culture of respect, a culture of health in some organizations. But this culture is important. The services on top of a bad culture are earrings on a pig. And that's not what Flutter is doing, but that's what some organizations might try to attempt to throw some dollars or pounds at this problem and expect a respectful or a better culture in their organization. It just doesn't happen like that.
Yeah, thank you. I know we're on a time crunch here. Yvonne and Brigitte, and then Dr. Bailey, I mean, everybody should speak here, but and make sure you exchange messages for connectivity to reach each other later. Brigitte?
Yeah, no, I would say I'm much along the line with Yvonne about, talk to the ones who's calling the counseling line about what they actually can do. And I think there's something about the compassion, but also taking away the shame the shame of not being able to heat my house, the shame about, because that comes creeping in. And if we don't really tell people, you know, it's not your fault, it's how the world is right now, we're just adding to them not being able to get their head above and see what's going on. But I will also say, I'm a big fan of working remotely, but my God, people are feeling lonely.
Yeah, it's 3 minutes past the hour. Yvonne, I know you have to jump, but why don't you sum up and talk about what's going on from your view? Turn on.
Live in a world of uncertainty. And I think what we need to do is to be clear of what is important to us. You know, clarify what is really important to you. I think connect with the people that matter and have a community around you. So I think this is the 3 C's: clarify, connect, and communicate. Have a community and communicate. And hopefully it will bring you at least in a good space to combat the uncertainty that you face, because that's out of our control.
Thank you. Dr. Bailey, would you like to sum up?
The greatest gift that I believe everyone is really looking for right now is hope. A hopeful leader is a helpful leader. A hopeless leader is a helpless leader. So whoever has the most hope has the most influence. So how do we create and infuse hope? Recognize what people are doing right instead of what they're doing wrong. Research says 1 minute spent on recognition creates 100 minutes of initiative. So when I know that I'm recognized for the behaviors that I am demonstrating that moves the organization forward, moves my life forward, then I have hope. So how do you be a compassionate, hopeful, trusted leader right here, right now?
May I ask you, because you live in Florida, it's unbelievable, the damage, physical damage, but what about the mental?
The mental damage has been incredible, but here's what we've discovered in Florida. Kindness has emerged where neighbors are helping neighbors. It doesn't matter what the pigmentation of their skin, socioeconomic status. People are finding a way to help my neighbor, not because of what I can get, but because of who I become. It's the right thing to do. And it's creating healing in Florida that we've never seen before.
Thank you. I'm out of words. Dave, do you want to take it? And Andy?
I think that in what we do in response to crisis and human problems, I think that sense of hope is important. Acknowledge whatever, whether it's a hurricane, the passing of a beloved monarch, or financial pressures because of escalating energy crises. I think to acknowledge whatever's going on and interject some positivism and hope is a good note to end on.
Andy Elliman, thank you for sponsoring and for being there. And we'll see you on the trail. Would you like to sum up, please?
Yeah, I just think it's been fascinating to hear everyone today. Obviously, the theme, you can tell the theme of hope is probably the right word, what you said, Simon. But also, I think it's more, we're going to get through this. We always do. Right? One thing that we as humans are good at is overcoming the challenges and proving that we will get through. We always do. But we need to take a step back sometimes and listen to what others are telling us. We can't always lead. We sometimes need to listen. And I think that's the biggest challenge for companies at the moment is, okay, you may be part of creating the problem. You need to now listen and actually solve it. And that's where your hope will come from. That's where you'll lead.
Thank you. Michael Piker, thank you very much for being involved. I value your perspective from the corporate executive suite. Please sum up.
Barack Obama talked about hope, and that's why he was elected president. And
yeah, twice.
So the leaders that espouse that, which some do, some don't, I think bring it to their populace and lead the nation. And hopefully we'll have leaders to do the same.
Brigitte, I welcome you to come back again. Yvonne, please come back again. James Moss, thank you. And wonderful, absolutereload.com is a really cute video. Sort of, you use avatars, right, rather than people.
Yeah, perhaps, but they're people at the end of the line and people like, you know, face to face like we are. One thing I'd just like to add as a tail ender here is just the importance of mental health. And I think that underpins sort of everything this discussion is about. And it's so talked about, but actually it's very hard to deal with. And it's a good thing to latch onto.
All of you will receive a program link at the end of my business day today. It's going to take I have to do some snipping and editing, so it'll take me the rest of my day to get this rendered. But then I'll send it out as soon as possible. And I'm going to host it on globalbusinessnews.net and Global TV Talk Show.com and put it on my YouTube channel and LinkedIn. So over the coming weeks and months, more than 500,000 will be distributed. Hopefully people will open it. So feel free to send it around to your own lists. This has been an education for me and frankly an honor to be able to have you guys on the program, because without you, I'm nothing. So someday we're going to do live conferences and would like to have you all come. Thank you for being on Global TV Talk Show. This is Ed in San Diego signing off. Brigitte in London, Michael in London, James Moss in London, Andy in Cambridge, Yvonne in DC, Dave in Minneapolis area, and Dr. Bailey, who's down the street here in San Diego, but from Orlando. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.